Hi, welcome to the Urban Outdoorsman SoCal video. My name is Danny Milton, and today we're going to be talking about the Yeti SB165. I was lucky enough to demo this bike out at the Sedona MTB Festival. I'm not going to show a lot of the POV footage I got from that day while I was riding this bike. If you want to see the POV footage, the raw POV footage that I got while I went down Grand Central twice, I already put out a video. You can click on that link right there. That shows me going just the downhill parts. You know, no one wants to see me huff and puff while I'm climbing on this bike. Before we get into the video, please do all that fun stuff for me. Hit that like button, share, comment, subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. And just for reference sake, I am 6'2", 240 pounds, and the dimensions and all the sizes I'm going to be giving you today in today's video are for the extra large frame. Quickly, we're going to go over a few components of the bike. The front fork is the Fox Factory 36 Gripper 2, which has a 180 millimeters of travel. So the rear shock is the Fox Factory DHX2. That is the 230 by 65 millimeter, and the rear end has 165 millimeters of travel. And the drivetrain of the brakes, I was riding the T2 model, which had the SRAM. So it had the SRAM 10 to 50 tooth cassette in the rear, and it had the code RSC 4 piston brakes. So real quickly, we'll go over the initial feel of the bike, you know, how you feel when you first sit down on it. And with all of that travel, I mean, it felt super plush and just really nice the first time I sat down on the bike. The reach felt really good. I'm looking at my notes here at 505 millimeters. The head tube is not a crazy amount of slack. It's at 63.5 degrees. And the seat tube was really steep for a bike with this much travel at 76.9 degrees. The stack was also really low at 620 millimeters, and the wheelbase, it's not a crazy long bike like some of the bikes out there. The wheelbase is 1,285 millimeters. So as I was riding this bike out to the first trail I did to Grand Central, you know, I'm going to bounce around on it, go through a couple of corners here and there just to get a feel for it. And just bouncing on the bike, the amount of travel this thing has is just insane. With that 180 mil fork up front and 165 in the rear, as I was bouncing on the bike, it just felt really solid, really planted, and the suspension felt really good. Oh, there's so much travel on this bike. Just sitting here bouncing it. Oh my gosh, and it's not, the rebound feels really good. It's like a nice, good, steady push to the travel. So this bike does have the coil spring in the rear, and this is probably one of the first coil spring bikes I've ridden in quite some time. So I was worried that, yes, usually coil springs have, you know, really good low bump sensitivity, but I was worried about it having too much sag. And it's kind of a difficult thing to set the sag exactly, you know, properly like you would on an air spring. So while I was riding this bike out to the trail, I was really surprised to see how high it sat in the travel. There was very little sag at all and very little pedal bob, you know, just as I was riding out on the road to the trail. So now we're going to talk about uphill for a little bit, and it's really easy for any bike manufacturer out there to make a bike that is great downhill. I mean, pretty much every bike that I've ridden does a great job downhill. It's really difficult for most companies to make a bike that is great downhill and also great uphill. So with that 180 millimeters of travel in the front and 165 in the rear, and with that coil shock, you wouldn't think that this bike would be very, you know, pedal efficient going uphill, but it's quite the opposite. So going over some of the specs of the drivetrain, the chainring in the front was a 30-tooth chainring. The cranks were 170 millimeters long, and like I said, it had the SRAM 10 to 50 tooth cassette in the rear. All of that combination, this bike pedaled really well. That switch infinity system is just so amazing. So of the three main bikes I rode out at the festival, I did the Ripmo V2, I did the Canyon Strive, and this was the third bike that I rode. And of those three, with that 30-tooth chainring on this bike, on the SB165, and that SRAM drivetrain, of those three bikes, I think this bike definitely, for me, pedaled the best going uphill. While I was pedaling uphill, I didn't feel any pedal bob at all. I mean, there might have been just the smallest bit, but nothing that you're gonna really think about as you're pedaling. And on top of that, with that coil shock, the rear end had really good low bump sensitivity. While I was going over rocks or roots, the back end of this bike would just stick to the ground, keep traction, and just made it even easier to climb the hill. So now we're gonna talk about downhill a little bit. And just let me, right off the bat, I am not worthy of this bike.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
The bike wanted to do so much more than I was capable of pushing on this bike or on this specific trail. That being said, it was a really fun bike to ride. You know, I love 27.5-inch tired bikes, and this is no exception. You would think because of all that extra travel, it would just, it would feel really different, but because of that Switch Infinity system and just being such a great Yeti bike, it felt amazing, and I really had a lot of fun. This bike soaked up everything that this trail had to offer. As hard as I could push it, this bike just kind of like, you know, shrugged it off and just kept pushing through. It made all of the small sends that I had on this trail, it made the landings feel pillow soft. All of the rock gardens, it made them feel like pebble gardens, basically, with all that travel, and it just ate up everything that this trail had and that I was able to, you know, push it through. And near the bottom of the trail, it does get a little bit more fast and flowy, you know, going through some tight turns and stuff, going through some tight sections where the trees are. And this bike, the front end was super nimble. You know, that's what you would expect, that was such a low stack height, and the 27.5-inch tires. It did an amazing job through all that stuff as well. And the last thing I'll say is I didn't feel any pedal kickback as I was going off those sends or going through those rock gardens. The back end of the bike, the travel felt like it was still, you know, staying in contact with the ground while under braking, while I was pedaling. You know, it all felt really good. So overall, this bike is amazing. I had a blast riding it. For this bike to have all of that travel and be so good on the downhills, and then on top of being such a great climber, it's just amazing. So the bike that I rode was the T2 model. That is the top of the line carbon model, but it has all of the SRAM components. I'm not a big fan of SRAM brakes. I do on my bike have the GX drivetrain. What I would recommend with I should say the spec that I like better is the XT stuff, the Shimano stuff. I would go with the T1 model that has the XT drivetrain and the XT 4-piston brakes, plus you're getting that 10 to 51 tooth if you go with the XT. So for all of this travel and great spec that you're getting, you know, what would you think a bike like this costs?
If you have to ask, big man, you can't afford it. I got $4.
So the model that I rode cost $7,199, and there are a couple of upgrades that you can add to that if you want to go to the AXS. That is all of the Bluetooth stuff on the bike, so there's no cables for the rear derailleur and the dropper post. That's an additional $700. And then if you want to add carbon rims, I believe it's a DT Swiss carbon rims to this bike, that's an additional $1,400. And Yeti throws you a small little bone. If you want to do both of those upgrades, the AXS and the carbon rims, they do that for $2,000. For me, that's a lot of money. I mean, even just the bike, you know, with the regular rims and the XT drivetrain, the T1 model, you're looking at $7,200. For me, that's a lot of money. I don't think I would ever purchase a bike that costs that, but if you have the money, I would definitely spend it. I mean, this bike is totally worth it. It was amazing, and you're getting a great bike for that amount. I really wouldn't say that this bike is for anyone. I mean, anyone can ride this bike, but it's a lot of bike, and it wants to be in a bike park. It wants to go down the steepest, gnarliest sends and rock gardens and jumps and anything that you can send on it, and this bike can handle it. But I definitely wouldn't recommend it to a beginner. It's a lot of travel and it's a lot of bike. There are better beginner bikes out there. That being said, as good as this bike is uphill and downhill, you know, you could pedal this bike anywhere. I mean, shit, buy it and take it out to the Strand and ride it up and down the coast on some flat pavement or something. and you're still going to have fun on it. That's how great this bike is. All right, thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I was able to help you out, help you if you're thinking about buying this bike. The one bike that I can kind of compare this to, which is equal in as far as travel goes, would be the Canyon Torque. I have done a review on that previously. It was the older model. I believe it was the 2018 or 2019 model. I can't really remember off the top of my head, but that bike had similar travel front and rear. That bike was also very fun to go downhill on, but it was not so great pedaling uphill, not anywhere near what this bike can do pedaling. So that's probably the closest thing that I would say is to this bike. There are a couple other bikes that have like 170 mil travel up front, you know, like the Bronson, or I believe the HD5 also has a 170 mil travel. But nothing I've really seen that comes close to this 180 in the front and 165 in the rear. All right, so please do all that fun stuff for me. Hit that like button, share this video with your friends, leave any comments down below if you have any questions, if you want me to compare this to a different bike, if you have any questions, you know, like if I misspoke, I screwed up something while I was talking about this bike. I do that all the time because I have so many numbers in my head and I'm getting kind of old, so, you know, starting to forget stuff. Definitely subscribe to the channel. We're coming up on 1,000 subscribers. I'm really excited about that. I'll be able to do a couple more things as far as interacting with you guys out there once we hit that 1,000 subscriber mark. So really excited about that. And last but not least, you know, click on one of these boxes in the corners. One's going to take you to a rides playlist, another to a favorite video, and click that logo over there in the corner, the Urban Outdoorsman SoCal logo, to subscribe. Thanks a lot.